Bueno, muy buen día a todos y todas las estudiantes y los estudiantes que nos siguen en el Facebook del Observatorio Estudiantil OEUNED. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas otra vez a su espacio de desarrollo académico y de investigación, con el fin de que todos ustedes se conviertan en agentes de cambio para nuestra institución y sus otras instituciones, porque también tenemos estudiantes que nos acompañan de otras universidades de Costa Rica y del mundo. Nos complace, mi nombre es Maino Barrientos, soy el coordinador del programa de investigación en fundamentos de educación a distancia y el coordinador general de la red de investigación en educación a distancia en línea abierta del mundo. Y me complace mucho poderles dar la bienvenida a esta actividad, en la que tendremos el honor de poder compartir algunos consejos prácticos por parte de nuestro invitado especial del día de hoy, para que ustedes puedan aplicar estos consejos en sus procesos de investigación. Lo que hicimos fue que a través de la página del Facebook de OEUNED, los invitamos a todos y todas ustedes a plantear preguntas específicas, dudas específicas que ustedes tenían en sus procesos de investigación, para trasladarles estas preguntas a nuestro experto y que él pueda generar algunos consejos para todos ustedes. Nos acompañan esta tarde, el día de hoy, el doctor Paul Prinsloo, investigador experimentado de la Universidad de Sudáfrica y uno de los principales expertos africanos en los temas de investigación sobre educación a distancia, entre otros temas. Él está esta semana en Costa Rica atendiendo nuestra invitación en el primer coloquio sobre medios, producción y educación que se está llevando a cabo jueves y viernes de esta semana acá en la ONED. La entrevista, vamos a tomar las preguntas que ustedes nos hicieron llegar al Facebook y las vamos a transmitir a Paul en idioma inglés. Él va a responder en idioma inglés y esto va a quedar grabado y va a ser posteado en Facebook para que lo puedan ver. Y si tienen algunas preguntas, algunas dudas de idioma o algo así, pues nos pueden hacer llegar sus preguntas también. Trataremos de ir muy despacio en la formulación de preguntas para que él no sea difícil entender en el idioma inglés, y Paul tiene un inglés bastante accesible. Él va a ir también despacio y para que cada una de las preguntas pues puedan ser evacuadas y ustedes puedan eh, incorporar los consejos que nos dé Paul a sus procesos de investigación. Entonces, a partir de ese momento voy a cambiar al idioma inglés para iniciar la entrevista con Paul. Vamos a tener básicamente 4 tipos de preguntas. Las preguntas de ustedes fueron categorizadas en 4 áreas de interés. Las preguntas serán hechas de forma anónima y también las respuestas van a ser de forma general. Thank you, Paul. Welcome back to Costa Rica again. And thank you very much for collaborating with our observatory and with our students by answering and giving them some tips in order for them to improve their research processes. So thank you very much on behalf of the observatory.
Thank you, Maino, and thank you for everyone. It's a huge honor to be with you, and I hope I can share some light on my own understanding of the research process, and I hope my answers will help and point some way.
Thank you very much. I'm sure they will. The first group of questions that we want to ask you, and I would like to ask you please to go on kind of slowly so our students don't have problems with the understanding of the English language. The first question, or the first group of questions, relate to research methodology. Why, Paul, when you developed your research proposal, why, if you have to choose between one methodology, one qualitative methodology or one quantitative methodology, why these methodologies as they are explained in books are not applied exactly as they are explained in books? Why do you usually have to add extra methodology instruments or theories or perspectives to qualitative or quantitative research projects? For example, a matrix or a specific analysis of variables or a specific analysis of strengths or weaknesses, or depending whether it is quantitative or qualitative. Why do you usually have to complement qualitative and quantitative frameworks when you develop research projects?
Thank you. It's a very, very good question. Let me start at the beginning. Research comes from a research question. There's something that we don't know the answer, whether it's societal or whether it's governmental or organizational. There's a problem, there's an issue we would like to understand, and we have a question. Now, normally I start, and I can just share my journey. I start by reading about the problem before I choose a methodology. I think that's often where part of the problem lies, is that one has a question, a research problem, and you think it is quantitative and you think it's qualitative, and you start your journey in a particular methodology. I would like to take a step back and say, what is your question? What is the problem? And what do we already know about the problem? So that brings me to your literature review. I often think that students and myself rush into solving the problem without reading what was already done. And then if I haven't read widely about the problem, then later on I discover, oh, this, we already know this, and then I have to add. So just to take a step back, what is your research problem? What don't we know? Then to make certain we don't know, what do we already know about this problem? And that is your literature review. And only then one gets to the point when one decides what type of methodology, quantitative or quality, will give me the answer to the problem. So then often you would say, this problem can be understood and answered through a quantitative methodology, through a survey, through some kind of statistical analysis. This will give me the answer to understand the problem, or this is a qualitative study. So and then you start your journey. You just say in a quantitative study, I will use a secondary data analysis or survey. Qualitative study, you will say, I will do a sample, I will do interviews. And then you start to do the interviews, or you get your first results back from your sample. Quantitative, then you suddenly discover, or you may discover, yes, it gives me the answer. Or you may say, this, it doesn't give me the answer. That it does not tell us why this is a problem. And that often happens then, that I must add another methodology or another survey, or to possibly even in qualitative studies, to add another interview or add another bunch of stakeholders. What can happen is the other way around. In qualitative studies, is that you set out to interview 20 people, you have your research, your interview schedule, you have the questions you want to ask, and then after the 10th interview, there's nothing new coming out. And that we call data saturation. And that means I don't have to do the other 10 interviews, I can stop earlier. So while this question relates to why we often add a survey, it can also happen the other way around, that I discover the answer to my research problem earlier. So just to recap, Maino, I think The issue is the methodology must be related to the research problem. It must be a fit. Often we think we can understand this problem quantitatively, but actually a qualitative methodology will be better, and the other way around. So to conclude my answer or my thoughts is, what is the research problem? What do we already know about the problem? What don't we know? And then this problem will be solved if we use this methodology, quantitative or qualitative, and we think we will get the answer, and we may stop earlier or we may stop later.
So according to what you say, it is essential to read sufficiently before deciding on what methodology. And then even when you had done your literature review and you had decided on a specific methodology, you may find out that you will have to make adjustments, methodological adjustments, in order to help for the solution of the problem, or to determine that the solution of the problem has already been there and you don't need more research or more data. Is that right?
I think you're right. I think the important, what I hear in the question is that the project is taking longer than the student thought it would take, that somehow there's now an extra unforeseen issue, and we want to prevent that. And I think that's why I would rather suggest to my students to spend more time on the research problem and the literature review, so that when we start out with this journey, we're fairly sure this will be enough, or we may even stop one step earlier. But I don't like to add another aspect later on for the work of my students.
Great, because the second set of questions relate to probably this step back, right, to the literature review. And the question is, when you start researching, how can you find reliable sources? What kind of path can you walk towards this previous information that you need to read and organize, that we usually call literature review, to understand your problems? Where and how and what kind of path should we walk to be able to find more reliable sources? Because I imagine if the sources are reliable and well constructed and I can find them, then it will be easier for me to be certain about my problem. And then obviously to walk towards methodology with more confidence.
What I do is I would, on Google Scholar, there is on the left-hand column, you can select a year, and I would normally say the latest. I want the latest information or the latest journal article on this topic. And then I would key in words, for example, how to identify a problem, and I would put it in quotation marks, and then search. And then I will get a number of articles that was published. Then I would look at which of those articles were cited the most. You will see some of these articles were not cited once, or they may be cited more. So I would normally, when I start my own journey, I would look for one that has been cited a lot, and then one that it has not been cited a lot, and I will download them, I will read them online. But for me, the almost juicy part in that is not only the article, but the list of references. So I would then actually read the list of references as if it's an article, and I will see which of the voices, who do they quote, who did they go to,
Mhm.
in both articles. And I may, after about reading 5 or 6 articles, I may discover everyone refers to the scholar or the work of the scholar. And then that gives me an indication, if I work on this problem, that person is the expert on the field. And that helps me. So I would start with 2 articles, a very new one and a very cited one. I will read them through. Even if the article doesn't make sense or doesn't take me places, I would look at the references and see which names are come out in one and the other article, and then start to look into them. And then, so that's one way I use reliable sources to identify the key authors in a specific research problem. Google Scholar for me is a good source, a reliable source in finding academic articles. If I just look in Google, now that's a different ballgame. Then I think there's a few important pointers. Look at the address of, if you type in a few words and it shows a site, and you click on that site, look at the address, look at the date, look at the author. Is there an author, or is it just a general article? Look whether it's a national government organization. Look if it's a news organization. Look if this is a personal opinion. Normally in the research, your academic articles are the sources you want to quote. The more popular sources will give you a taste of what the problem is, but then you will have to go back to the academic articles. So that's how I work. Often students would start with a book, and they would find the book in the library, and they will try to read the book from page 1 to page 350. And that may not only take them a lot of time, it may frustrate them. I would start with journal articles, popular articles, and then if I see this book is quoted a lot, then I'll read the book. I hope that helps.
Sure. And once you find this group of scholars that pop up, right, and that somehow gives you the sensation that those are the people who are leading the discussion about those problems, what kind of advice would you give our students as to whether or how to contact these people, how to make a more personal contact with them? It's not just a matter of reading their work. Is there any way our students can go or follow in order to contact them, to have a more personal perspective of them and their work?
It depends on why you want to contact them. If there's an issue in their work that they don't understand, that the student or the reader of the article don't understand, possibly before I write or try to make contact to the author, I will read more about what he or she has said. I don't want to look like a fool, or I don't want to speak to the author and then he or she would tell me that, did you read this article? I actually answered the question there. So I would do my homework. Secondly, on most of the articles, they have a corresponding author. But now in the world of academia, one finds that authors move between institutions. So that email address may not be the most recent address. Mm-hmm. But I would click on that email address, or I will write an email to that email address. But I will also go to Google and I will type in the author's name and initials and surname and the institution and see what I find. And often there on Google, I will find a different email or a more recent email. Mm-hmm. I also use LinkedIn often. Often what I find on Google doesn't give me their email address, but give me their LinkedIn profile. And then I would try to make contact them on LinkedIn. I may also, if it's a prolific scholar or a very controversial scholar or just someone that you really want to get closer to, I will not send a Facebook request. I will see if that person is on Twitter, and then see when they're there, I can start following them. But I will first build a relationship with them before I make contact. That sounds strange. I first want to engage with their work before I go and say, I've read your work, I think I understand, but I have this problem. In most of the research on undergraduate level, even early postgraduate level, it doesn't often happen that students or researchers have to contact the author. It doesn't often happen. I think professionally for your development as a researcher, that can be useful, but we'll get back to that later. But for now, I think read what you can find, use Google Scholar.
So basically not to rush into contacting an author, right? What if the idea doesn't come to mind that fast? Where is a good source for ideas to research about? What if I'm clueless, right? In designing or finding a problem to work with? What would you suggest be the first step for just getting ideas?
I think it's to expose yourself to a variety of sources. The first one would be to read, just to read, whether around the problem, do a Google Scholar search, do a Google search, see what, read. We often think these ideas will come to me at night. They don't. You have to read. It's like plowing a field, and you have to plow, you have to sweat, you have to put in the seeds, you have to wait for it to rain, and then the magic happens. When you least expect it, suddenly there's these green plants coming up. So I would read a lot. But secondly, I would follow people in my interest field. I will follow them on Twitter. I will see what they tweet about. I would, if my issue is any issue, I would key in that hashtag on Twitter and see what I get. And if I step into those conversations on a daily basis, it's like planting seeds. I would talk to people. I would go and talk to lecturers. I would make contact. But expose yourself to a number of sources, and the answer would come. You will find your question. No, the question will find you.
Right.
The question will find you.
Question is there waiting for you, right?
Yes, yes.
Sometimes our students, mainly when they start, sometimes they don't see the logic of researching, right? And the importance of research. Would you, being an experienced researcher, would you recommend a student to pursue a life of research, to become a researcher? And if so, what considerations should this student have in order to start a life as a researcher?
That's a good question. I think there's two ways to approach it. I think journalists, commentators, people hosting shows on TV, they're all researchers. They're not academic researchers, but they do research. People working in bank with client records. Research is everywhere. We think of research of being this academic activity, and actually research is just being curious about things we don't know. So life as a researcher can mean that you become a journalist without a PhD, without doing quantitative studies, or without being an experienced researcher, but you can be an experienced interviewer, looking for the facts. So that's one journey. If you love academia, if you love studying and reading, then normally becoming a researcher is connected to a qualification. And not a first qualification, not a second qualification. To become a researcher, And to make research your career, then a PhD, a doctorate degree is a start. But that's only the start. Your PhD is your passport to travel. And without the passport, you can't travel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a long journey. It's, for me personally, it's an exciting journey. It keeps me awake at night. I hope I live to be 150 years old, because there's a number of questions I want to know.
After all these years in the field of research, I imagine you have been confronted to very specific problems that require a lot of specific information that is difficult to find because it's very specific, because the problem is very particular. What do you recommend our students if they are confronted to very specific problems that they really want to answer to, but then it's more difficult even to find information that may give methodological or enough referential information to approach the problem?
Another good question. I think it depends what purpose this question serves. If it's a research project on undergraduate level, I would often tell the student that question is too big for now. It's too big in scope. You must go smaller. You must go more specific. So research questions on a bachelor level, on a master's level, and a PhD level, they can almost be the same question, but it goes deeper and wider, deeper and wider. So if a student will tell me that he or she cannot find specific information on this problem, maybe the problem needs to be redefined.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say almost two strategies. I would redefine the problem to say, have you looked here? Have you looked on Google Scholar? Have you spoken to some expert? Is this a problem? Is it too big a problem for this level? Is it PhD problem? So I would play around with that. I've never encountered that a student tells me that he or she cannot find the information. Mm-hmm. It's often in the question we ask that our question is wrong. The information is there, but our question is awkward.
Good. Thank you very much, Paul. Those are the questions that many of our students posted on Facebook, attending our request to have some questions for you. I have a couple of other questions in general for in terms of the objectives of our observatory. One of the questions is, according to your opinion, what is the importance of research, of learning how to do research in the academic development of our students, regardless the level they are at, regardless if they are undergraduate, graduate, or postgraduate students? What is the importance of developing research skills parallel to our students' academic development in general, in their programs, in their careers?
I think the answer to that is, what are the questions living inside you? It's like people going on holiday and youngsters tell their parents, oh, I'm bored. What can I do? When you enter a degree program, you cannot be bored. There must be questions living in your materials. There must be questions living in your contact with your lectures, with fellow students, and open yourself up to those spaces. For me, curiosity is not something I can teach you. If you're not curious, I cannot make you curious. I can, if you would come to me and say, Paul, I don't want to, or I don't have a research question, but I'm vaguely interested in this aspect, I can take you with me. I can say, Okay, go and read this, go and talk to that one, go and experience that. And if you don't go, there's nothing I can do. So research is the basis of doing a degree, is because you want answers to problems that we experience. Doesn't matter on what level. So that is how I would approach that, Maynor.
Great. In our case, the observatory is inviting students to ask questions about their life as students. In our organization, what do you think is the role of students? Uh, what is the active role of students, or what should be the role of students in relation to our institution modernization, or our institutional change, our institutional future, and their role in their territories as students? Um, how should students empower themselves as actors in our institutional, as agents in our institutional change and modernization, and in the solution of problems in their territories?
I think now that you've asked the question, I was thinking about it the first time to say research, and the research is actually a narrative. I have a story to tell and I want you to listen. And the research that students can do in their territories can bring those stories to the institution and say, this is my story, this is my community. And especially if students would, the institution may not listen, but it will not prevent me from telling the stories. So I would create a blog. I would create a group where we tell these stories. I will publish a student book and say, these are our stories. This is the stories of students studying through OEUNED. This is the difference we make in our community. And this is the difference OEUNED make in our lives. So I would collect stories. And stories are powerful. Stories, we tell stories to our children and our grandchildren. And institutions need to listen to student stories. And this observatory can be this library of student stories that are based on research, but stories students bring and say, this is who I am, this is who my community is, this is the difference my knowledge makes in my community.
Well, great, Paul. As always, it has been very inspiring talking to you, listening to you, listening to your tips, and I'm sure our students will be more than happy to hear what you had to say. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for this interview. Uh, Thank you, Paul, and hopefully Paul is going to be with us for the rest of the week, and why not? We may encounter and tell more stories together. Muchas gracias a todos los estudiantes, todos y todas las estudiantes que nos enviaron sus preguntas, que creo que han sido muy interesantes también las preguntas. Paul las ha considerado muy interesantes y espero que hayan encontrado las respuestas y los consejos de Paul también muy interesantes, como nosotros lo hemos disfrutado, que ustedes también disfruten esta entrevista. Por el momento, agradecerles a todos, agradecerle a Paul, thank you Paul again, agradecerle a todos los estudiantes y estamos en contacto por medio del Facebook para próximas actividades dentro del observatorio. Así que bueno, un feliz día a todos y a todas.